when we see ourselves, oh, there we are. So that it's very official. That means it has started.
Okay.
So grab some water quick while you get your last second together. You do your thing. You let me know when you're ready to rock.
Too many jackets on. Sorry, it's cold outside.
That was awkward.
Oh, no.
No, we're fine. We're fine. We're fine. I should have held
You
it.
didn't bring your gigantic.
Hot. Yeah, well, because they put these out tonight. So I was like, this is really cool. So I might as well use them.
That's cool. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very official. They're stepping in here for us. So awesome. Well, you let me know when you're ready, and then we'll go ahead and we'll start our agenda. I'll do my best.
Okay, I'm good. All right.
You gotta call us to order.
Oh, I call this meeting the Equity and Inclusion Commission meeting into order.
All right, 6:35 p.m. Perfect time. We'll do our roll call, which I will call out you all's names so we can do the here we're present. So Commissioner Bars. Commissioner Gedkin.
Present.
And Commissioner Vimy Reddy. Commissioner LaGrange.
Present.
Commissioner Philip Crawford.
Present.
All right, and I'm Antonio Montez, the staff liaison for the Equity and Inclusion Commission. So glad to see you all tonight. Very cool. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Excited for our conversation tonight. So we're done with agenda number 1.
Do we need a motion to the next thing or no?
I don't think we need a motion for that specifically, no.
Okay.
Did you want to copy the agenda?
Actually, yeah.
Oh, sorry. That, and then you have a toolkit? Okay, there's a toolkit too for you. We're gonna talk about that.
Cool. Thank you.
All right, very good. All right. So item agenda number 2.
My notes don't cover this part. How do I call the next thing again? I forgot. Sorry.
Well, we always receive public comment. So we'll receive any public comment that we have about anything you're interested in talking about. I don't see any public comment. Okay, excellent. We should probably take a motion to close the public comment period of the meeting. So
I motion to close the public comment.
you wouldn't motion, hold on, sorry. You wouldn't motion because you're the chair. So you would accept a motion.
Motion to close public comment.
Those all in favor say aye.
I'll second it and then I'll say aye.
All right, you're good. So it's been moved and properly seconded that we close the public comment period. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right.
I'm sorry, my brain's.
You're totally good. You are totally good.
Okay.
We'll move on to item agenda number 3, which is the review and approval of the December meeting minutes. Did you all get a chance to review them? Did you have any changes, suggestions? We're all good? All right.
Happy to move that we approve them as drafted.
Second that.
So that's been moved and properly seconded.
Let's move on to the business items. Oh.
You're okay. You're good. You're good. This is a very formal thing
Okay.
that we're learning through. This is not an easy, intuitive way of doing business. So it's all good.
So,
It's been moved and properly
it's been
seconded.
moved and properly
We
seconded.
accept the meeting minutes as written. You're good. You're good. You're good. You are totally good. No worries.
Are we live?
No,
Okay, good.
we are live actually, but it's totally fine. We're totally live.
Pretty sure we are.
Okay.
We are live. It's all good. Don't worry about it. We're just here.
The number of people who would actually be watching it live feels minimal.
I watched the last one.
You
I-
did?
I'm-
Live?
I'm like-
Really?
Not live, I just
Okay.
watched it.
We had one view and it was definitely, no, I did not look at it. So it's just, we've been moved and properly seconded to accept the meeting minutes as presented. All those in favor, say aye.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed?
All right, so the motion carries. You're doing great.
Next item on our list are the business items, starting with review, equity, and inclusion toolkits.
Yes. So, a little bit of a light agenda this evening. We've done a lot of conversations and kind of level setting on a lot of the work that's happened since the city of Roseville as an organization decided to start this journey along equity and inclusion. And so one of the last things I wanted to kind of just go over with you all is our equity and inclusion toolkit. Talk to you a bit about how this tool is currently being used, how I think it will continue to evolve in its usage, and then just kind of chat through the questions and kind of the purpose of some of the questions that are in this toolkit. Get your feedback on it. And this is really much a work in progress, a working document. So I totally anticipate this to continue to evolve as we get better at doing this in a meaningful way as an organization. I totally expect us to continue to push forward with challenging ourselves to be more reflective in doing this toolkit. So we'll talk a bit about that as we go forward. And yeah, so that's thing number one. So why don't I pull this up here also so that it's in front of us. You have a copy as well. So so we can do the paper copy, we can do the electronic copy. It's really up to you. So why don't I start a little bit with some background on the toolkit itself. Then we can kind of go through the questions, and you can ask me questions that you might have, or comments that you may have, or suggestions that you may have about the document itself, and we'll just kind of see where the conversation takes us. But first, we forgot our icebreaker now that I'm thinking about it. We can't just jump into the meeting without doing some relationship building. So why don't we pause, because I'm still learning how to do this also, so we all make mistakes. Why don't we pause and do a really cool icebreaker that Gwen has for us? You gotta let me know next time that I forgot.
I wasn't sure if that was like on other business. Or
No,
not,
I gotta put I'm gonna put icebreaker on here next time so I can remember.
Okay.
Alright, so you go ahead with your icebreaker question, your relationship builder. What do you got, Gwen?
Okay. So the icebreaker this time is like a story, and so you're like allowed 2 words, and we're gonna go in a circle like twice, and you're gonna make up a story or something. So
We can make it up together.
make it up together, yeah. So I guess I can start. So I go one day, and then
There was.
An octopus.
That lived.
Underwater?
His mom.
really liked
Chicken nuggets.
And 2, as in T-O.
Okay.
Ooh.
That was what I was gonna ask. That's a weird transition.
It's a very tough one. I love this though. You really stretched it.
And to her credit.
Oh.
Whoa.
Tactics. Just passing that along.
To her credit. She loved.
Oh.
To dance.
in her
Oh.
like underwater. That's what I was thinking.
Kitchen. And. Sentence.
Sometimes she
Also liked.
To cook.
Nice.
She usually
Went to
Store.
On Thursdays.
Because she.
Needs ingredients.
Nice.
I don't know.
I like this game. I don't know.
go one more time.
The rest of the meeting.
Yeah.
The octopus
Liked to
Play with.
The Great Barrier Reef.
Mm,
because his
Front yard was
The C.
Nice.
boom. We really got that.
Nicely
That
done.
was really good.
That was a
y'all.
good one.
That's a good one, Gwen. I'm gonna have to steal
Yep.
that one. That's really cool. Thanks for that.
Yeah.
Next time, let me know that I forgot that.
I will.
We can't be missing those. Those are important. All right. Let's get back on track. Sorry. So, equity inclusion toolkit. Back to that. Sorry, they're doing a really good job shifting with us. So the equity and inclusion toolkit. So what I would share here is that what the intent is that when the city as an organization wants to do something, we have a document that helps to guide decision making on policies, programs, initiatives that ultimately center building an equitable and inclusive community. Like that's the hope, right? And that's a really big goal. And so how do you try to recognize where we're at as an organization in our journey of being able to do this effectively, and also help folks think about all parts of our community as best as we can when we're wanting to do something. And so that's why the Equity and Inclusion Toolkit was created, was so that when a department head or a leader in a department or the department itself decides we want to do something, how do we know that we're thinking about community and the parts of our community that may not always be at a decision-making table, at a city council meeting, expressing their needs, right? And so, so this toolkit was kind of the way we wanted to do that. So you'll see on the front page a couple of things that are really important. It's to help decision makers evaluate ideas and propose solutions with a perspective inclusive of equity, right? I wanted to make sure that folks recognize that this is not a test in competence, that you're not being judged for the decisions that we're making or the recommendations that we're making, right? But it's to help us make decisions that are advancing our community aspirations in an equitable and inclusive way. So if you all remember some of those community aspirations that we talked about in the last couple of meetings. And so this is also a public document. So the intent is that there is some accountability in the way that we're making decisions, and folks will see kind of our thought process along the way to think about how are we centering equity and inclusion in the decision-making process.
So is it when they make a decision, they fill this out and it'll be published?
Yeah, so right now, this is currently being filled out on request for council actions that go in the business items section of the council agenda. So, so when we need the council to do something, to take action, this toolkit would be completed as a part of that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Is this a new toolkit or is this like, have they used this a lot before?
So this toolkit is the version you see in front of you is an amended version of a toolkit that was in place prior to my arrival. And the reason I changed it was because the previous one was very lengthy. And I think it was a little intimidating. I think it was about 10 pages long. And you know, getting council's action on a number of things already requires a ton of work, a ton of preparation. And my goal is to just start folks thinking about this, and then continuing to enhance this when we get the basics down, right? So when we can answer questions really comfortably around why we're making decisions and how that's advancing our community aspirations and inclusive of our community and our values in a way that has equity and inclusion kind of in the foundation of the answer, then I think we can continue to enhance and add to this, but we have to first build the muscle to be able to even say, these are the folks that we're thinking about, these are the things that we think could happen, which you'll see in the document, and how we're gonna try to mitigate those. So this was an amended version of something that was here in place, and those weren't being used regularly during the request for council action process prior to, so we actually just started in January 1 requiring these for all requests for council actions on business items. So that's a big win, I think, for our work, and it's a big win for our commission to say these will be a part of the council packets, and they're actually in the way that they're written, they're included in the council packet. So that's also a big win, I think.
And council packets are public in the same way that like our agenda packet. So we could go online for a February meeting and like review whatever's, that's fabulous. Nicely done.
Yeah, so it's I think it's a great step in the right direction, and the thing I love about it is it's starting to, we'll talk about the document itself, but folks are starting to think about it even earlier in the process, right? So like I tell folks all the time, if we're starting to talk about equity and inclusion at the point of like when we're going in front of council, all the stuff has already been done already, right? We don't go to the council until the stuff has already been done. And so I'm folks are reaching out to me and talking with me like, hey, I've got this idea and I wanna do this. And I'm like, this is great. We're already thinking about how does this play into that decision-making process. So I'm excited about that step. It's a small win, but I think it's gonna be a big mental model shift for a lot of the folks that make decisions in our organization. So so this is a public document, and to that point, and the public should know that city leaders are considering community voice and potential outcomes to our decisions that we're making. So
Is there already any document, any decisions have already been filled out, or is this you're gonna be doing?
you can go to it's the, forget the date, but our public works team recently submitted their 2026 work plan to the city council for review and approval. And in that packet, there was an equity and inclusion toolkit that they submitted as part of their work. So that one is a little, you can definitely go check it out. It's, this I think is good for large planning documents, but it'll also be something that when they go to say, hey, you've already approved our work plan, and we're gonna do, I don't know, a random road project on a random street in the city. When they decide, yes, we're gonna go forward with this, they'll do another equity and inclusion toolkit for that specific project, right? Because what is going on County Road C and Lexington may not impact the folks over on B and Snelling, but what's happening over there will impact those folks. So we need to make sure that when we're doing those things and like actually doing the work, that we're also still thinking about how are the decisions that we're making in that specific project impacting community. So, what you have here on the kind of the first page, which is the back part of your first page, is just what is the title of the project. Let me move down here so folks can see online too. And then just a description. We are going to insert whatever we're gonna do. Couple boxes here, meeting dates on the far left is obviously what dates it'll be going to council. And it's date or dates because you could come back to council multiple times, right? So, you list all the dates that would be in there. Prepared by is generally gonna be someone in the department, whether that's a supervisor, manager, or the department head themselves. And then reviewed by is usually a combination of the department head and then me also, right? So I'm a part of that process and asking these questions and also kind of thinking forward. What are some of these questions aren't always like straightforward, so we talk through how do those things work. And then, our community aspirations are really core to the work that we do. So which one of the community aspirations is this request? How is it gonna support that, right? So is it about fostering a strong sense of community? Is it about a community that embraces diversity through public programming? Is it about safe, inclusive, and welcome and connected transportation? So which one is it that or multiple ones that you're gonna think this is gonna be impacting? So that's kind of the baseline information. Any questions or thoughts on that?
So for the community aspirations, that's just how it relates to like equity and inclusion almost?
Yes, we're always wanting to lead with equity and inclusion, but I'm thinking about, for example, when Public Works did their Public Works 2026 plan, a lot of that talks about a well-connected infrastructure transportation system, right? Probably talks about some economically prosperous components around how do people get to work and from work in the city of Roseville. So they've probably checked off a couple of these boxes, but the questions that you see on the next page are really getting to how is it advancing our work as a commission, so it's a good question though. So that's the first step, is just kind of some baseline information on the project. So the next step is this question: what are the desired outcomes and impacts in the community? So when I work with leaders, what I am hoping and coaching them on is that this question is not necessarily always about like the funding component of a decision, right? Which is like we're on budget, or, you know, that's important. It 100% is important. I understand that. We oftentimes come to that already though. We're like, hey, I know that this is gonna be within my budget. Like, so I wanna challenge leaders to think outside of that component of like, yes, it's in budget and that's important, and you need to make sure that you're a good steward of the public dollar, 100%, right? But also what I wanna talk about is like, how is this going to benefit, or what do we want the benefit to be of this project for the folks in the community, right? So if it's a new business in a certain area, or it's we want to do a new pathway in a part of town that doesn't have a lot of connectedness, like the benefit is the folks in that part of town are gonna be easily able to access the bike path, or access the walk path, or access the green space behind them, or whatever the case is, right? Instead of having to walk across a bunch of busy streets, they can walk through this path, which is dedicated for folks to be able to access that space, right? So the desired impact and outcomes in the community is we want those things so that we can have a healthier community, so that people can recreate easy, whatever the outcome is, right? So I want folks to think about what is the intended outcome and impact in the community from a people and human-centered standpoint, and not the dollars and cents aspect, because we always come to decisions with that. So. Thoughts or questions on that question, or feedback? Okay. So the next question is, who will benefit from or be burdened by this decision? And again, many times we talk about like how the levy is impacted and how that will maybe increase our tax, right? And that's important. We need to make sure that we're keeping minimal levy increases, because that is directly passed on to homeowners, right? And renters, because renters then likely see the complex nuances of how much a property tax increases the cost of living, right? So we want to make sure that we're diligent about making sure that the decisions we make are not hopefully going to be big burdens on the levy. However, kind of going back to the same one in problem, or the question number one is what's the human-centered side of this conversation, right? Like, who will benefit or be burdened from this decision? So like, are we going to approve another, like liquor store in a low-income neighborhood in our community, and there's already two there, right? Like, that's an obvious burden to the community, for that part of our community, and say, hey, do we really need that to be there based on whatever the current situation is, right? Or like, what's another burden that a community could face? If we don't invest in that pathway that we use in example one, that would allow for easy access to a green space and folks to recreate, to lead to better health outcomes, then the burden then is that it's going to be harder for the people to get to the green space, and then leads to worse health outcomes for that part of our community if they don't have access to green space already. Do you know what I'm saying? So how do we think about our decisions from a human-centered standpoint around who will be burdened by a decision. Now, benefits are also really important, right? So like, who's gonna benefit this? And then the flip side of that is if someone benefits, then someone else is likely not gonna be able to, they'll maybe have a burden, so it's kind of two sides of the same coin.
What does levy mean? Because I have like a weird music song in my head and I'm pretty sure it's not. a place
Yeah,
that
that's a great question. I'm glad you asked that. So city governments in general, both state, federal, state, and local, like city, the way that we generate revenue to be able to do things in the city is by a tax. And there's a couple of common types of taxes, right? So there's like a property tax, which is like one of the biggest revenue drivers for most government agencies. So you own a home and your home is worth $100,000, just for easy math. And your property tax is 10%. So then you would pay $10,000, doing my math quickly, you'd pay $10,000 a year for your property tax on the home that you own. And then that would then go to various government agencies, and that's the levy, right? So they set a levy target every year, the council does. They set a levy target and say, we need this amount of money to do our work, and we've decided that we need an increase based on last year's number because we need to fund these things that community has told us they want, right? So the levy is the tax number that the city or the government agency sets so that they can have the money, the revenues they need to do their work. Does that make sense? Okay. So there's this property tax, there's a sales tax often, right? So you'll see the sales tax is a way that you drive revenues as well. And we actually just got a sales tax approved for the maintenance and operations center. So across the street, we have a building that houses all of our public works and parks and various equipment. And so the city wanted to use a special sales tax to pay for a new building to hold all of our equipment. And so that had to go to the voters of the residents of Roseville. And so they voted, and they voted in the affirmative. It passed for the sales tax to be used for funding a new maintenance and operations center. So there's sales tax, property tax, and income tax is kind of the third component of like revenue generating for government agencies. And then there's fees. So like you want to build something on your home. You want to do, I don't know, like a new something. You have to get a permit to do that. So then you come to the city would issue you a permit, you'd pay for that. And so then the city can generate revenue through fees also. Those are kind of the main ways that governments fund themselves. So when you hear levy, that's a great question. It's about the number, the tax number that has been set by the government agency to fund itself.
Specifically property tax, right?
Yeah, property tax is kind of the most common. Yeah, property tax is the most common. But, for you talking about for the levy itself?
Yeah.
Yes, it's for, so that's for property tax, yeah. And then the other taxes can kind of come into play based on your government agencies. Yeah, good question though. Very good question.
I have a question about this.
Yeah.
The benefit versus burden.
Yeah.
Is the question focused on once this decision is made and the project is complete, what will the benefit or burden be? Or also taking into account, like, if you're doing road construction on County Road B for months at a time, is it focused on like the burden to folks who live there of having the work done, or focused on once this is complete, here's what we'll have?
I think it's both and in a situation like you're talking about now, when we're like, hey, we're gonna be down to one road on one of our busiest throughways in the city, we have to talk about who will be burdened by that, right? And so, but then also long range in the sense of like if, an enhancement to a roadway, hopefully no one's burdened, right? But like, if we decide to do something that will increase the tax levy long term, then we need to think about how does that burden both homeowners and renters in the local community, because we'll have to then set the tax levy higher to be able to continue to fund those positions long term. Make sense? Yeah. So then to that point, the next question is, what are any potential unintended consequences that could happen if we were to make this decision or go through with this plan? And how can we mitigate or lessen those negative consequences, right? Because not all things are bad. So, we gotta lift that up. But oftentimes we make decisions based on a limited set of information that we have, and that doesn't always account for all the complexities that happen in community. So if we are talking about, hey, we wanna do this, how does it lead to, or how will it lead to, unintended consequences for some of the folks that are in our community, right? So I think sometimes, talking about the levy again, I think sometimes about like, as we continue to grow as an organization and the needs of our community change, it's easy to say, hey, we need more people. And as government agencies, your most expensive cost generally is your staff, is your people. And so increasing, I don't think any government agency takes adding employees lightly, because that oftentimes leads to a levy on the community, a higher levy or a tax on the community. And then thinking about like how does that impact folks that are in rental situations, right? Because as a property owner, generally, you're gonna see some long-term wealth building in the sense that your property value has gone up, right? But as a renter, you may not see that wealth building opportunity, right? But you still may feel the pain of like having an increased levy if that is passed on to you as a renter and your rent increases, right? So how do we mitigate those strategies? So are we applying for grant funding that can help offset some of the cost of a full-time employee, right? So what are the ways that we can think creatively is kind of what I want this to be in terms of how we're making decisions and how that's impacting community. Any questions about that? No? Okay. So then kind of the last question here is, how have we incorporated and or engaged community perspective into what we're recommending to council, right? Has there been a touch point where we've connected with community and they've said, yeah, this actually makes a ton of sense. We want to do this. And that's a really important part, I think, of how we bring recommendations forward. Now, again, if you're not doing this until like everything is done, then you've already missed this opportunity. And so that's why I'm really excited about this kind of getting upstream a little bit more, and folks like, oh, I know I'm gonna have to do that as a part of this before we even start the process. So I think that as this becomes more normal in our everyday, day-to-day work, this will be something that'll be very early on in processes, and that may not have always been the case. So excited about that. And this is really just about, again, what has community told us that they want as it relates to this particular thing that you're asking council for. You're asking for another staff person, and they're gonna do preventative, whatever the case is, and we're like, hey, community has told us actually, we want folks to do more preventative stuff around aging in place. You know what I'm saying? So if community has told us that they want more aging in place preventative work, and we're like, hey, let's bring on a staff person part-time that'll do some aging in place safely outreach, then community has told us that we want to do this. We're aligning it with our recommendation. We've gone through those other questions. This makes sense, right? So that's kind of the last question that I want to leave folks with as they're getting ready to pull together their equity impact analysis. And this is really, I think, kind of pulling together all the other random thoughts or answers to the questions into one cohesive narrative, right? So this is where you do I said this, said that, said this, said that, and here's the full picture of what all that means together.
I have a question about this. Maybe a recommendation for
Love it.
tweaking it. Are you ensuring that they've engaged the community who would be burdened by whatever is being proposed or potentially burdened?
Okay.
Because I think it sounds like there's a lot of progress being made away from this, but I think sometimes they say, well, we opened it up for public comment.
Yeah,
And, you know, the public may or may not have access to whatever public comment was made available.
yeah. I really appreciate that perspective. It's a very good question. It's something that when I talk with folks and coach them, we do talk a lot about folks that don't have access to government, in the sense that like everyone has access to government, right? Like anyone can walk into this building, anyone can call, anyone can send an email, right? So like technically, yes, everyone has access to government. At the same time, we know that there are parts of our community that while they have access on the surface level of what access means, may not have the empowerment or the comfort or the confidence to engage with us. They may not know how to follow our social medias, and they may not know that there's surveys online that you can go do, right? So a lot of the conversations that I have with folks is about how are we engaging with folks that we don't traditionally hear from. And I'm happy to share that a lot of my leaders think that way also. So I think it's just about continuing to build the confidence in the way that we're doing our work, so that then when they're doing this, they're challenging themselves to step outside of the box of comfort and be like, hey, we did the open house and people could come in if they wanted to, right? And this happens at the speed of relationship too, though. So we're working and hoping that we can build we have a good network, but continue to strengthen our network with community contacts in various communities that we can reach out to, right? So what does that look like? So it's a long-winded way of answering your question to say we try and we need to do better because we can always do better. But I like your kind of your suggestion here on, is there a way to maybe reword this question to ensure that we're hearing from all members of our community and not just the folks that know how to come to a city council meeting, can come to a city council meeting, and or know how to email or call their city council person, right?
And the fact that you're asking people to identify who's benefiting or being burdened by, like, that you're calling out, here's a specific place to
Yeah.
focus.
Yeah. That's our hope. That's our hope, is that we get there. Mm-hmm.
So would the council not take action if this weren't submitted as part of their process?
You know, that's a really great question. I don't know that council would not be able to take action. I think this component is really the city administration role.
Got it.
It's really our operation side to ensure that this is there. I could share with you that for a long time, a lot of times there was already in the request for council action a section that says what's the equity impact, or I think it was racial equity impact first. We've changed that to equity and inclusion impact. And so that was oftentimes not available, just NA. And so they were taking action on that. I do expect them to continue to take action because that's what they need to do. I think if this is more on our operations side to ensure that this is in place and that it's being done.
That's great.
So there's a couple of different checkpoints along the way where we're normalizing this. In our clerk's office here, the person that kind of does all of this in our software system is a key component, a key partner in that, making sure that those are there.
That's great. Yeah. I like how simple everything is. And I'm going to then say, I think it would be fascinating over time to be able to like mine the data of like, are we always benefiting the same community or burdening the same, and you can't really mine that data when it's kept as simple. But maybe in 2 years.
Yeah, I do see on the roadmap continuing to leverage data as a part of the way that we're doing our work and we're making decisions. I don't know that we're quite there yet. And I think those will be some of the things that as folks get really comfortable around these things, adding in that layer of how is data helping inform our decisions and how are we doing
Yeah.
that, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I also really love that the aspirations are at the beginning because it, of course, is an equity and inclusion toolkit, but in some ways it feels like it's like an accountability toolkit
Mhm.
of saying like, are we really doing the thing that we're trying to do as a city?
Mhm.
And yes, that then gets into the human-centered side, but it's not as like in your face of equity and inclusion.
Yeah, I know that we're building the muscles to continue to work forward and through this, and I'm excited about where we're headed. And I think that as we continue to work together, both as a commission and as a city and as a leadership team, I think these will continue to get stronger. And then when they continue to get stronger, then we'll push a little bit more and say, hey, you know, when folks are feeling really good about it, then we'll say, how do we bring in some of the components that you're talking about?
I can't imagine 10 pages. I mean, no wonder it was NA.
Yeah, and there's already tons of stuff that folks are already submitting as part of their request for council action work. And so I wanted something that would be, you know, just a few questions, get us thinking about it, get it on the front end of projects instead of being kind of like, okay, I gotta do this RCA and I need to fill out this thing. So now folks are starting to talk about it earlier in their projects, and I'm really excited about that. Because I think we've got leaders that want to move this work forward and will move this work forward, and this is one of those avenues and support systems that help them do that. So yeah, so that's where we're at right now with this document. And again, I expect this to continue to evolve and change and morph as we, you know, I was working with Public Works and they were doing it for their 2026 plan. And it was kind of weird to do it for a 2026 plan because they're like, well, we got, 10 projects, and you're like, how do you write? Because each project is a little bit unique. So how do you talk at this level of detail for each project? So we talked high level about their project in terms of they're investing in pathways, they're investing in streets, they're investing in this. And then came back and said, for your individual projects, you'll still do these. And that's when you'll do the thought process and thinking about how are we engaging community, how are we hearing from community, and also too, like, along that continuum of various levels of community engagement. We've been talking a lot about that internally. Like, sometimes it's just we want folks to know what we're doing. And then sometimes it's like we want to collaborate more on what we're doing. And sometimes it's like we want to know what you want to do. And so how do we set the right expectation when we're having those conversations so that community knows like what they're signing up for and what they're going to get out of whatever they're doing. So
What is RCA on the last page?
So RCA is request for council action. Yeah. So that's what this is. This would be a part of the request for council action. It means that the city is asking or requesting the city council to take action on an item. So we want you to take action on our 2026 work plan to tell us, yes, you agree with it, yes, you agree with all the projects, and to go ahead and move forward and you trust us to do it. So this council would take action on that. That means they would vote and approve it, or they would vote and say, no, we don't want this plan. Does that help?
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. So I'll think about, and I'd be open to, if you wanted to sit with a suggestion and say, hey, the wording on this question, if you were thinking about it this way, do you want to send that over to me? I'm totally open to that, but I also think about, how do we ensure that it's not just the folks that know how to access government that can give us their perspective. Good stuff?
Yep.
All right, sweet. So that concludes our review of the equity and inclusion toolkit. At this time, like I said, sit with it. If you have suggestions, further questions, you all know how to get a hold of me. We can have a convo and talk more about it as we continue to grow it. Alright, so I wanted to flow into the discussion about commission and city work, and I don't have a super like outlined agenda on this. I'll take this down because we don't need it anymore. I don't have like a super like this is what I want to talk about. I think what I'm hopeful that we'll discuss is you all have gotten a good idea of the work that we've done to get to this point. And I have some thoughts on how I think the commission can do this, because this is important, but then also do work in partnership with the city to continue to ensure that we're like holding ourselves accountable and being equitable and inclusive in the way that we're doing our work. Like I've got like some, I think I shared this with y'all last time we were together, some pathways that I think make sense. But I wanted to hear from you all just kind of on like, what are you interested in doing? How does that mesh with what we are doing so that we can do some good work and cause some good trouble together? So that's kind of what I want to talk about as we kind of spend the next, 25 minutes on that. Does that work for you all? And also any questions if you have any questions about any of the stuff we talked about up until this point, we can answer those too. So that's what I'd like to spend the next 20 to 25 minutes talking about. It's just, what do you all want to do? Or I can give you kind of my thought process on it, the pathways, and we can react to that. How do y'all want to do this?
Yeah, could you give some examples probably? I think that would help, cause I'm like, there's so many different things we could do.
Yeah,
so.
yeah, I could do that. Are you okay with that? Okay. So I shared this last month, and I think the way that I think about like our relationship and our partnership, we'll continue to do this kind of thing and come together and do our work. But I think that there's three pathways that to me make some sense on how you all can be more deeply connected and influential in the way that we do our work at the city. I think the first pathway that I see is around like policy and planning at the city, right? So this would be if you're like the person that's like, I like to read policy, I want to, give feedback on it, I want to do those things, like this is kind of your wheelhouse, right? Like you'd be sitting with a plan and being like, yes, this aligns with our equity and inclusion work and our goals and where we're at right now, or no, it doesn't, and here's my perspective on it, right? And so this could be things like I shared with you all that I've been working on the bike plan and pathway plan with Public Works. It could be connected to something like that. I just was working with our, I don't even know Noel's title, but Noel is super awesome and works in Public Works and leads a lot of our green initiatives. So if you saw or heard anything about the work that Roseville restaurants are going to need to use like compostable takeaway bins and such, like that all happened in Noel's shop. Noel does a lot of that and leads with the team that she works with, but Noel's kind of the driver in that space. And so she reached out to me, and there's going to be some climate action plan stuff that we're going to be working on as a city. So I think that's kind of one pathway, would be working alongside me and other city folks as we're trying to develop long-range plans for various initiatives and or specific policies on the way that we do our work, right? So one of the things that I want to think about is like our procurement policy and the way we make decisions. We talked about that a little bit earlier in our journey here, was like, how do we remove barriers and make it easier for small businesses to do business with the city of Roseville, right? How do we create that pathway? That's a policy. There's a number of different policies that are in the city that I would like to think about and make sure we're having an equity and inclusion lens on the way that we do policy work, right? So that's kind of one pathway that I see for our work together. The other one I think is a little bit more focused on like the workforce. So thinking about things like the hiring process, the recruitment process, kind of like talent. I call it talent recruitment, talent development in terms of like promoting talent. And so like the recruitment on the front end is like, where are we sharing that we have jobs available. How are the job descriptions written in terms of like, do they have a lot of barriers that many folks that come from different backgrounds are not gonna be able to access? Are we asking 40 supplemental questions and then asking for resumes and then also asking for people to put their work experience in our software system, and people are just like, I don't even wanna do this is too much work, right? So kind of some of those like front end processes, if you will, just helping us along with that. And then the other component is, I think, is like, as we're thinking about employee development, is there opportunity to ensure that community's perspective on employee development is there, right? So this is maybe a little bit more, another inward focusing one. I think all of our pathways are more inward focusing, but this one is more, I think, on the workforce component of the city. And then the last like arm that I see is, I shared with you all that I want to stand up a cross-functional action team that'll focus on equity and inclusion broadly beyond the spaces that I am in and the relationships that I've developed. We have a large organization, 200 plus employees. There's no way that I can be effective at building a relationship with each one of those folks in a meaningful way to talk about equity and inclusion and to think about our work in different spaces. And so my plan is to have an action team of about 12 folks that would do some learning journey stuff and really empower them to lead in our equity and inclusion work in their various areas, and would love for community to be along on that journey with us. And the commission makes the most sense to me, is to participate in that and be a community perspective on that action team. So that's kind of the third pathway that I see. There will be some ad hoc opportunities as well. I think the Maintenance and Operations Center is gonna have like an ad hoc committee that'll be pulled together to just bring some community perspective to that project as it relates to like, you know, that's gonna go on a big green space right now, and you know, that's always difficult. So will there be an opportunity? I think there may be an opportunity for one of you all to be a part of that kind of focused discussion as that project moves forward. So there may be some ad hoc opportunities as well to go along. But for folks that maybe want to, not that you have to be on one of these, but I think for folks that maybe are like, I'd like to do a little bit more, those are, I think, the three areas that I could see our work kind of making sense. But I could be totally wrong. You could have really great ideas too, so I want to hear those.
Let's just say that if there's any opportunities to do work around data, I'm more than happy to work on that.
Yeah, I love that. So I think, yeah, I think that's great.
And I don't know to what degree the city would
Yeah,
allow that, depending
Mhm.
very much on whether it's publicly available data sets.
yeah, that's a good point.
But that's what I do for a living.
Yeah. Tell me more, like, give me some examples of what that could look like.
So, I mean, it sounds like there aren't a lot of these toolkits, but you know, what Amanda was talking about is an example of looking at publicly available data and pulling out themes from that. So it could be analysis of qualitative data like that. If there's any kind of surveys that are going out to community members to get input on projects, survey design and analysis is kind of my specific area of expertise.
Oh, I don't know.
So, yeah, I mean, anything around that, I'm happy to, or even if it's, you know, giving feedback on, are these questions written in a way that's inclusive and accessible to community members? Because can't tell you how many surveys I see that are written at, you know, a 12th grade plus reading level that are intended to go to, you know,
Community.
ninth graders.
Yeah.
Literally. So, yeah, just even things like that, so program evaluation and data analysis are like my areas, so happy to either do anything in that realm or give feedback on work that's happening in that realm.
That's really cool.
Connected to that, I've been this whole onboarding process. I've been making notes of the various types of scorecards that would be really interesting to know. And so even if we don't have the numbers, we could set like, here are the areas of data that you or others should be looking at within
Yeah.
this city. And so getting to like even by department, what does representation look like within decision makers? What level of turnover is happening? I know we've talked about people are very long tenured, but as we work to diversify the workforce, if we're seeing turnover specifically within newcomers, that could be something that's of note. What level of internal promotions happening? And then even for commissioners and council members, what representation looks like, and just trying to watch for improvement. I don't know how much time it would take from the commission, but it makes sense that it would be our group that's influencing how we're tracking progress. Yeah, or even if we decide to go around procurement, like what percentage of dollars is being spent by businesses owned by people of color, different areas of diversity.
It would be
Yeah.
interesting to do some like landscape analysis around that of like what are the metrics that other cities or agencies are setting around that? So what are they aiming for in terms of like what percent of dollars should go to X type of business to help set goals around that? Which I think exists for some of these things, but maybe not.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely other agencies that are like, hey, this is what we want to do. And so that could be a good benchmark for setting a goal. I think we've got some policy work on the front end that we got to do to be able to create that pathway first.
Yeah.
But I think those things could be happening simultaneously to an extent, so that once the policy's in place, then we have a meaningful, like realistic, attainable, achievable goal to say, okay, now it's here, this is what we need to go strive for now.
I think as we get more toolkits filled out, we can start tracking progress and seeing if we're trending in the right direction. I think right now it's just not filled out to the level we want it to be. And so once that happens, it'll be good. So something, not to connect to that, and I also don't know if this is within our purview, but something I've been thinking about, especially after, I'm sure, maybe you two know, because I don't know if you read the news, but there was a CEO killed, healthcare CEO. And I was thinking about, equity inclusion can be anything we want it to be, right? Equity inclusion in healthcare as well. And, question actually, do you know the percent of Minnesota that has health insurance?
Are you asking me again? Oh, everybody. That has health insurance. The percent of Minnesota that have health insurance.
This year, yeah.
I'm gonna say, let's see here. I'm gonna say like, I don't know. It's probably significantly lower than I think. 40%.
96.2% has health insurance. And I kind of want to connect this to what you were saying about access to government versus empowerment, right? People can have health insurance, but not empowered to go and use the healthcare system. And a lot of that comes down to transparency and the way we look at healthcare. And basically, there was a federal rule in 2021 that said that doctors have to be transparent about pricing, what MRI cost, PET scan cost. And there's a federal rule in 2022 that said insurers have to do the same thing, be transparent about pricing. But it's kind of like prohibition. We say prohibition, right? You can say alcohol is illegal and say this is a rule, but if you don't actually enforce that rule, plenty of doctors and plenty of insurers are going to work their way around that to not make it very transparent because they can just get more money out of it. And I was thinking, clearly the problem is not access to health insurance because 96.2% of it, I think it comes down to two things. It's one, education, and two, transparency, right? Like at a local level, can we hold doctors and insurers accountable, right? And say, how much does the MRI cost? How much do PET scans cost? And also for individual people to understand what even is an MRI scan? What does an MRI scan even do? What does a PET scan even do, right? And basically I was doing research with ChatGPT talking about, because even I didn't understand health insurance plans fully, but basically there's HMOs, PPOs, EPOs. These are all health insurance plans. It stands for health maintenance organizations, preferred provider organizations, and there's a good matrix that kind of explains what each one does, and I was working on it. I think it'd be something that'd be really cool. We could even distribute, right? Even if we can't hold doctors accountable, just educate at least our populace on how health insurance industry works. But in a perfect world, I would like to maybe potentially the city do like a pilot program with like state legislature backing where they give us more governance around holding those federal rules accountable with the doctors in our community, and potentially even, again, it's a pilot program, so, if doctors all of a sudden, we're trying to make them transparent, okay, screw it, we're gonna leave the Roseville area, at least now Minnesota knows, like, this is like a result of running such a pilot program, so even if it doesn't go well. But the offside, maybe it creates a lot of transparent pricing and people are more willing to go to the hospital, understand what's happening, within their system, and leads to, like, significant change. And I have a document written on this, and I'm meeting with Pat on Friday, just because, again, I need to understand, again, legally what the city's allowed to do. I think mentioned 2 months ago, but like there's a $70 million budget, right? But like how much of that is actually discretionary versus what is mandatory and like city services that have to be done every year. I think once I get a better understanding, I can create a better document on how a pilot program like that could go, and even with like, can we get the state legislature involved with funding some of that and seeing if they'll allow us to do something like that? A lot of words. I don't know if that made sense. I guess, again, I think there's more political will for it now, especially since the CEO was killed, right? I think, unfortunately, there's a general lack of empathy from the public, right? So clearly there's something wrong with the system, right? And this is my one way about going about it, but obviously there's still a lot of questions and like open-ended of like if this is something actually doable. And hopefully, once I'm gonna talk to Pat about this because he's been a city manager for so long and he knows a lot about this. I wonder what his thoughts are and what are the issues and kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Stoppage. Well, what could hold us back from accomplishing?
Barriers.
Barriers, yeah, that's the word.
I mean, that's really interesting to think about because, with that high a percent insured, Minnesota, though, last time I looked, it may have shifted, but was second last in the nation in terms of racial inequities in healthcare, which is pretty striking considering that we have, the Mayo Clinic is here and like there's a lot of really high quality healthcare. But I think I hear what you're saying about sort of lack of access or lack of transparency. I think that's a big part of the picture, but there's also inequities in treatment and how care is actually being provided to whom. So, yeah, education of the community, but education of the providers as well.
That's a tough act to follow, huh?
Yeah, that was like, you had all the research and that was really
know.
impressive.
All I thought is, did this happen while you were on vacation? Should we all go on vacation more
I have
often?
revelations about all the stuff we need to do to change. No, I appreciate that. I don't know how much autonomy we would have in leading an initiative like that. So I think there's also, I was thinking about kind of your interest in cost of healthcare, obviously in this case, but transparency I think is a good theme, thinking about our work as a city agency and what does transparency look like in the various parts of our organization that we do work. Could be something that we could maybe kind of like look into as it relates. I don't want to say look into like we're investigating, but just be thinking about what does transparency look like to the point about scorecards and toolkits and things like that as we're moving forward.
One thing to think about also is, obviously, like, you're one person trying to do this work for the city. We're a group of volunteers. It might be worth also looking into academic partnerships. So there's a ton of talent we have so many universities here. There's a ton of talent to potentially draw on, which would also open up access to grants as well. For evaluation work, for looking into doing pilot programs, for whatever it might be. There's some pretty cool stuff that the U has on, I think coming out of the School of Public Policy, but they have, it's a program that agencies pay to do evaluation work, but it's basically a very low cost evaluation because it's overseen by professors and run by graduate students. So there's some interesting opportunities there, and they do partnerships to apply for grants for it and things like that. But something to look at to try to bring in more people to work on this.
It's a great suggestion. Actually, I'm working with the U on
Awesome.
a survey for our employee population, so.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it just kind of came out of nowhere and I hadn't even thought about like what other opportunities are there at other schools within the U or other universities that are locally here do with grad programs. That's a good
And not
suggestion.
even grad programs, like you'd be surprised at the quality of work that can come out of undergraduate research projects working on things like this. And you have, I'm not biased or anything, but I used to teach at St. Kate's and it's a majority minority student population. More than half first-gen students. So it's a population that has a lot of lived experience in the kind of topics that we're looking at.
We should talk more specifically about what those connections
Yeah,
look
absolutely.
like across the organization. Yeah, that's good. How about you, Will? I hear your voice. There's all of the ideas are good ideas.
I mean, one thing definitely, you were in high school, right? Like, what do you think this commission could do better to help equity inclusion in your high school too, right? And what you would like to see more?
That's hard because I feel like the group that I hang around and the people who are in my circle, it's like a really diverse circle. And I feel like the team that I'm on, I don't feel like there's any problem because of my situation. So I'd have to like talk to other students about it. So maybe do some kind of survey or something. Get some ideas from other students to see maybe ways they think we could help with the equity and inclusion at the school.
And even outside of school, right? Like just in the community as a young person, doesn't it to be just about school? I mean, I know that's a big part of your identity though, so I don't wanna like dismiss it, but just like, there's just being a community member too, so. How about you, Gwen?
Yes, I can think of some things that I would like wanna improve about school or whatever, but I'm not sure if it would like directly connect to the Equity and Inclusion Commission thing.
Okay.
It's like, I guess, I lost my train of thought. I'm not sure what I was gonna say. I had an idea and then I lost it.
Let us know if it pops back.
Alright.
Or like maybe like me and her were both on this commission, so maybe ways more students can be included on like government choices and stuff like that as well.
That's what I was thinking, right? Like we have all these decision makings and all these plans that we're doing, and we likely don't hear from young people about like the bike pathway plan, right? Like, and that's something that younger folks want more access to is multimodal transportation. It's not always about like car-centric, car-heavy transportation. So how are we like in relationship with young people as we're planning, because you all will be the folks that will be living with the decisions that we're making today, that will be whether we build if we end up deciding to build a easier crosswalk on Snelling and B, like that won't be in our time where we'll be able to really take advantage of it, right? But like that would be in y'all's time where you could probably take advantage of it. So like those are important decisions that we need to make sure we're hearing your voice on.
It sparks an idea for me on taking the toolkit that exists and the question around how have you incorporated or engaged community perspective. We could, as a commission, build out toolkits for various communities that are impacted. And so maybe we start with one that's around like, oh, you need to engage with youth. Here's the toolkit.
Guidance
Yeah,
for.
we can prototype from then that of different areas of difference within the community, but to make it a little bit easier as we hold accountability to say, have you talked to this community? Like, all right, here's sort of your playbook of,
Yeah.
here are the existing relationships, the places that you can go that, like, you can get that input without each department having to sort of recreate the wheel.
Like a community outreach
Community
playbook.
map.
Yeah,
I just learned that we have something similar to that.
nice.
Trying to get my hands on it.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if I can
We don't have to start from scratch.
get my hands on it, that could be a cool
That'd be awesome.
project.
Yeah. The other thought that sparked as we've been chatting, I so appreciated the overview that you gave us on how city government works. And so as we've talked about transparency and just like who has true access to government, there could be something that we work on that makes in a very approachable, digestible way, like the guidebook to how the city of Roseville government works. Like, here's how you can interact.
Yeah.
Here's how your voice can get shared. Here's where our dollars go. Like, it can just be so intimidating. If I didn't read the newsletter, I wouldn't be here. And so, like, how can we make it digestible and inviting beyond the dorks who actually read the newsletter?
It'll have a ripple effect because when you have well-educated citizenry, you have well-educated leadership, and like I want everyone in your high school to know what like a levy is, right? I want them to be like, oh, I know what that is, property tax, and the truth is most students don't, and I feel like you need to start that at a younger age. We don't teach a lot of the life skills, what a 401k is, and the financial literacy just in the world is not where it should be. Someone with a finance background, it's very unfortunate, and not to say it's not important to learn calculus and trigonometry because word problems, it teaches problem solving skills, but I also think we need to make sure that students and children are aware of this as they're growing up, so when they get into the real world, they're not like fully just like blasted.
Or even things like volunteering for a commission. Like, I continue to be just so grateful and impressed by both of you. Like, I dream of it not being a surprise, right? Like, that it would be perfectly normal that every commission would have youth representatives and a chair and vice chair who are rocking it, right? Like, and the ways that we can make that an easier entry, an easier learning curve, seems like we could then share that with other commissions, other parts of government.
One thing I'm reminded of that somebody told me when I first started teaching college is, so you put on your syllabus, here's the office hours. And somebody said to me my first semester, a lot of our students don't know what office hours means.
Yeah.
Like, they see that and they think, oh, you're in your office working during that time. And so you have to spell out, no, this is time where I've specifically set it aside that I'm in my office to meet with students, and I want people to come in during this time, and here are the kind of things we could talk about. So I think when you look at the city website, you see, here are the people who work in this office, here's their contact information. But you don't see, and you could call this person if you had a question about this kind of thing. Here are the ways you could approach it. Here's how you might write an email if you were emailing them. Here's what you could say if you called them.
That'd be really good, actually.
That would
As
be
a
amazing
document
to have.
of just like what you went through, right? I was watching the recording of this person does this and this person does that. Obviously, some stuff is more obvious, like fire and stuff. But like, it'd be nice to have it all just in one document, like laid out.
Yeah.
What you do if you want, again, like connection to the government.
But even like a generic, if you're reaching out with a question, here's a basic kind of phone script you could use. Here's a basic email template you could use. Because I've found when people have made things like that for emailing, state and federal representatives about various issues, it's super helpful to have a template to just be like, oh, here's the kind of thing I should say or should write. So even just having like a generic, because I have some neighbors who are very aware of how city government works, and they have an issue with parking down the street, and they're on the phone to the
Boom.
right office, and
Know who they gotta talk
they've
to.
got a meeting set up, but you know, they know who to talk to, and I'm not there yet, you know, like.
Well, everyone should be there,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, everyone should feel like they know how to do that. That's, you know, accessibility, right? It's transparency.
Or even coming for public comment. Like maybe this is, I might be suggesting a 2025 goal for our commission,
Get one
that we at least have one person sometime by the end of the year that comes to, but like, I've
But
never
you
my
see
whole
public
5
comment.
years in Roseville come and done public
It's
comment.
like office hours, right? People don't know, well, what's it for? What would I come and say?
Yeah.
Why would I do that? What would happen if I did?
Right.
Like, what would be the point of it? Would anything change if I did
Right.
that? Yeah.
Yeah.
Adding on to like including the kids in schools, I think every week we do this like, it's kind of like Raider news. And so it's like what's going on in your community or in the Raider community, like about sports and stuff like that, and the weather and, you know, lunches. Maybe we could add something in like a little section in that, like what's going on in the community outside of school, and like
It's a great idea.
what's going on in like the government or what are the new, I don't know, laws or whatever.
So you're gonna be the reporter on it?
Sure.
I like that
It's a
idea.
great idea, yeah,
Really
like
good idea.
city news or things that you could come comment on.
Yeah, right.
Beat reporter.
Have to ask your friends to come comment on.
I might have to, I don't know.
So 7:50, y'all know I always wanna respect your time. So I think what I'm hearing is that there's a lot of opportunity and interest. I think the things that are sticking out to me are data and leveraging our data tied to that, tracking the progress or the scorecards, I think is important. Praj, you gave us a really passionate plea for holding health facilities accountable to transparent pricing. We should talk a little bit about, I know you're meeting with Pat, but there's a community member that is connected with M Health Fairview, so I'd be curious to maybe explore that conversation with that person and you, and thinking about what does that look like and mean. Related to data, I think a little bit was thinking about better leveraging local university resources. So something to keep in mind. And then I think this community outreach playbook, I think, is a really interesting and cool perspective for some partnership. And then I think just overall approachability of the city as it relates to understanding operations, as well as having some available templates for interacting or communicating, maybe is a better word, with government. Does that sound like it captures? And then Raider News.
It's like having more ways for the youth to be involved with the choices made in Roseville.
And Raider News is one of the ways.
Yeah, I think a lot of we watch it like every Wednesday. We have a different like Raider News to watch, and it shows to the entire school. And maybe if we needed more youth on certain commissions, we can also say that in the Raider News, and also maybe make posters or something as well,
Yeah.
if that's really important to us.
You can also like talk to the student leadership team or something
Oh,
about
yeah.
a survey or something.
I love this. Okay. So we can continue this conversation after I get a chance to process and sit with some of this stuff. So that's good.
I'm curious, do you see it as being like we as a collective pick one project? Is it that okay, so we can all be,
Doing your own thing.
Yeah, I think if you have a passion and interest around something, then you should be able to explore that and see what is it, how can you connect that to this in a meaningful way. So that's at least my initial thought. To that point, 7:54 now, so I need to be quick on some quick little updates that I wanted to remind you all about. Let's see here, so reminders. So our next meeting is Wednesday, February 12th. So it's a week earlier than we normally meet, so we'll be back here pretty quickly together. So I'll need to pull all this together quickly, but February 12th is our next meeting, 6:30 p.m. here. I did send you all an email for the disclosure of financial interest form. Basically, it's just you letting the city know if you have any financial interests in a business or an organization that could benefit from the city. So answer those questions. If you have questions, reach out to me directly. Just wanted to make sure you all caught that email.
You said that, when was that? That was this
That
week?
was maybe this Monday, I think I said it.
I think I saw the email.
so.
I think it was Monday. So it's just like a Google form. It's
Mhm.
pretty quick and easy. So if you have any questions, reach out to me, let me know. To your point around folks being involved, we are currently accepting applications for open seats on the commissions. And
All of them?
commissions, well, we have 3 on our commission that are open. So if you know cool people that wanna come hang out with us, encourage them to apply. We have 1 on the finance commission, so if you know anyone interested in finance, that's available. We're not giving away Praj, you're stuck with us,
I was gonna
Praj,
ask if we could
sorry.
do 2.
That's a good question, I don't know the answer to that, but there's
Ask Pat, I mean, even.
open seat there. Parks and Rec has 3 open seats, so if you're interested in Parks and Recs, planning, if you're interested in planning, they have 3 open seats also. And there's 1 on the Police Civil Service Commission, so various commission openings, so if you know
And-
friends.
Are they open to these being filled by youth commissioners or?
So, yeah, I think there's some willingness, so yeah, so.
I feel like Parks and Rec, it's just ridiculous for them not to
Yeah, I
have
think they,
youth
we gotta make
representation.
sure there's some folks there, so all right, so those are the commission seats that are open. And then let's see here, so that was that, and then I think, would you all be interested at all in me maybe just providing you some, I don't know, projects that I'm working on in the city, just like a quick little update on some of the stuff that I'm working on? I mean, there's lots of stuff, so I wouldn't go over everything, but maybe some key things, like on a regular basis. Would you like to hear about that kind of stuff? Okay.
Like the bike stuff, for example?
Bike stuff, for example, another thing that I'm working on right now is language access. So we don't have like a reliable and predictable way that we provide like language access services for folks. It's kind of like as something comes up, it's like a mad dash for figuring out how do we, communicate with someone in the way that they need to be communicated in or they want to be communicated with. So I'm exploring some options for like a partner that can provide translation services in various languages for us regularly, including American Sign Language, which we wanted to make sure is accessible as well. So that's a project that I'm working on, and then I'm working on some policy updates around gender inclusivity and some of our programming and how that shows up and what does it mean for folks, so that folks can participate in programming in the gender that they identify with, and not necessarily what we as a society may think. So there's just a couple like highlights on things that I'm working on with some of my city partners. That's it. Any questions?
I had in my notes that you were getting started on the employee resource groups. Underway too?
So, no, not yet. I think I've shared with you, we're in the middle of strategic planning. And so we're getting close, and so all of our focus has been on closing that to the extent that you can close a strategic plan to say, let's go forward now. And so once that is done, then we'll be exploring the employee resource groups. So, more to come. I think this equity inclusion action team will be kind of the first test run of what that looks like and how it'll work. We don't really have anything formal like that. So we'll see how it's perceived and received. So yes. More to come. I'll put that down though so I can remember. Lots of stuff today that I wrote down. I love it. All right, anything else y'all got for me? Well, that concludes our business items then. You all don't have anything, and it's 7:59. Motion to adjourn?
I'll second that.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Boom.
Nicely
Did
done.
it. Nicely done. Y'all did it. Good work. I appreciate you all for showing up and pushing.
Thank you.
Work.